Hello, folks. I'm Brett Kinsella, and this is Gain, the Generative AI News Rundown. We have kind of an amazing show. And the last couple of times we've done Gain, the Generative AI News Rundown, we've talked about more than 24 stories each time. Today, we're going to cover a lot of news, but we're actually going to focus more on two really titanic shifts in the market, really big announcements, particularly around OpenAI with GPT-4o and what that means for ChatGPT, what it means for strategy, all these other things, and Gemini. Google had kind of a mixed reaction coming out of yesterday. I'm going to tell you why maybe you should be a little more optimistic, even though I'm right there with a lot of those people making critiques. But to break this all down, I've got my colleague, Eric Schwartz. Hey, Eric, how are you?
Really excited to hit some of the big headlines from this week.
All right. Well, your enthusiasm is palpable, or you're tired. Eric does have
No,
has a very young child, and so I'm not sure how much sleep he's getting. But you can't sleep these days anyway because there's so much going on in
no.
generative AI. I'm Brett Kinsella, founder of Synthedia, Voicebot.ai, the Gain program that we're all watching here, and Eric Schwartz is the head writer at Voicebot.ai. We've been doing this a long time in the conversational AI, synthetic media, and generative AI space. In fact, generative AI, our first article in generative AI was in 2017, and we've covered it very heavily since 2020. Eric's written hundreds of stories in the space. In fact, I think at Voicebot.ai, we're probably over 800 articles in generative AI, maybe 900, maybe close to 1,000. We should check that out. On Synthedia, the daily newsletter we started like a year and a half ago, we've got well over 500 articles. So a lot of depth here, but forget about all that. Let's talk about the news of the day. And let's start what happened on Monday. Monday was kind of a titanic shift. And what we saw was ChatGPT-4o, but also 4o. There's a lot of different ways for us to talk about what's going on here. But let's just hit a couple highlights and we'll maybe show you a couple things. So first of all, I think this was shocking for a lot of people. And I'm just going to bring up one thing that they didn't even mention. So they had this great thing. If you haven't watched it, I say go to YouTube, go to OpenAI. They've got the videos on there. Go to Synthedia or go to Voicebot. We've got articles where you can click through to the video to watch the 30-minute overview. This right here, this is text to 3D, animated. Isn't that amazing? They didn't even mention that. It's actually buried in one of their examples, and they have a lot of examples to show. But there's a number of things, particularly coming to ChatGPT. First and foremost, the Plus subscribers have been an elite class of generative AI users up to this point because with that $20 a month, they get access to GPT-4, code interpreter, and images, all these things that those poor free users, those hundreds of millions of free users that OpenAI says, didn't have access to. Now, GPT-4o, all the amazing bits of ChatGPT are going to be the same across free and paid users. However, paid users will just get more of it. So there's going to be limits for the free users. And so we'll see if they start using it a lot, they're going to wind up being into that conversion to paid. So that's the first thing. Just a quick rundown. Personalization through memory. This is something that's been trialed a little bit so far. Going to be a lot more of that. I still think that is immature, but it's going to be coming. So the more the assistant knows about you, the better it can customize your experience. Real-time language translation, a lot of demos on that. We're not going to talk about that much today, but it's actually very good and better than the other things we saw from Google on Pixel a couple of years ago. Listening to and participating in team meetings. So basically, you can invite ChatGPT to a meeting, and then it'll actually do the summary for you. Like a lot of this is not an enterprise solution, right? It's just going to be added to it, but which always has workflow and sharing and all these other things. But it is something that I'm sure a lot of these solutions that are doing meeting transcription are going to be worried about. They can explain how to solve a linear equation. What does that mean? Reasoning, Pythagorean theorem. Maybe we'll look at that as well today. It can read a chart and tell you about it. That's the vision is so much better than it was. There were some things you could extract from charts, even just a few weeks ago when you were on GPT-4 Turbo, but it's much better. You can create charts from CSV file that used to require a plugin. Now it looks like it will be native. You can take a picture of something. It'll give you like the calorie food count on it. Several other, quality of the voice. I've had some debate with people both in the newsletter and on LinkedIn about whether this voice is better. The voices are very, very good, silky smooth.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that sets them apart is the intonation and the expression just seems smoother to me than other things we've said.
And not just smoother, but responsive to how you speak.
Exactly. So that's like, there's a ton of stuff in there. Plus, oh, by the way, Bargin. If you were not part of the voice assistant revolution, you might not know bargen or interruption. So this idea that you've got the assistant that's just like answering your question or talking to you, and this is probably the most annoying part of the demos with OpenAI is, boy, that assistant is way too verbose, right? And it's like got a lot of personality. It's a good show, but on a day-to-day basis, that's going to be terrible. And so you even saw them during the demos doing the interruptions. But that is not trivial. I mean, this full duplex has been very hard for people to execute. Usually you'd have to do like a wake word in order to interrupt.
Yeah.
Now you can just start talking and it lets you go. And this is exactly what people need.
It's also addresses people who accused OpenAI of deliberately making the assistant verbose because you get charged theoretically by the token. Use up all your tokens.
Oh, I didn't see that. Yes, there is some truth to that. Although, essentially, in the ChatGPT type implementation, like if you're a Plus subscriber, that's not going to be an issue. It will be for the lower amount. I think what they're going to have to do is, we saw this in the voice assistant world. They introduced what you would think of as brief mode, so more terse responses, just like get the job done.
Yep.
If you want a companion, if you want to have fun with it, more like a character AI thing, and I'm sure character AI is quaking in its boots today. Because think about it, like GPTs are basically just character AI type personas, but now we have the expressive voice. It's going to be amazing. But if you want a companion, like, it's amazing. But I think we're going to have to, if you want a productivity assistant, which I think is what most of us want, it's going to have to be briefer. Do you want to bring up a couple videos that I thought we would show and point out to everybody?
Absolutely.
While he's
Start
doing
with
that,
this
hey,
one.
everybody, let me know where you're coming in from. Obviously we're on YouTube Live, LinkedIn Live, and Twitter. Just say a quick hello in the chat. That'd be helpful to listen. And also make comments or ask questions. We're happy to do that. All right. Why don't
right.
you play this? And also let me know if you guys
Hey,
cannot
this is
hear
Joe.
this.
I'm going to connect you to Acme Telco now. The new iPhone they sent me isn't working. I want you to get them to send me a replacement device. Can you take care of this for me?
You can count on me, Joe. I got this.
Ring, ring.
Hey, Joe. This is Jamie from Acme Telco. How can I help you out today? Hi there. I'm calling on behalf of Joe, who recently received a new iPhone from Acme Telco. But oh, got it. When did Joe receive the new iPhone? iPhone was delivered 2 days ago. Cool. Could you share the order number with me? Of course. It's 10293-849. Great, thanks. Is the device physically damaged in any way? No, there's no physical damage. It's just not turning on despite trying all the basic troubleshooting steps. Bummer. Would Joe prefer to return the iPhone to an Acme Telco store or ship it back? Shipping it back would be the best option. Could you please provide the shipping information and process to get a replacement? Absolutely. I'll email a shipping label and return instructions. Could you provide Joe's email address for me? Sure. It's joe@example.com. Awesome.
All right, Eric, you can stop that
just
here.
sent the email.
Okay, so there's a number of things that are going on here that I thought were kind of amazing and worth pointing out. And you can just keep this. We're going to go show another video in just a moment. But so the first thing is the ChatGPT, which is Joe's ChatGPT, knows things about him, knows his email address, has permission to share it, knew his order tracking number. These are things, this is personalization, memory, these types of things. It also has some information somehow provided by Joe that is a preference that he wants to ship it as opposed to take it to a store and those types of things. So this is like a personalized assistant. I do not think this exists today. I think this is something that exists at OpenAI in their lab, but I think it's like not something that you can use or will be able to use very soon. but it will be. It is where it's headed. So they looks like they have a demonstration implementation of it, and they do have fast ship cycles. So it wouldn't surprise me if a lot of these things just get plussed up. So this
Yeah.
idea that it has visibility to what's going on. So how does it know his order tracking number? Does it have access to his email? Did he tell it the order tracking number? I don't know. Does it have access to a database, a drive folder where he stores all these things? So those are some of the things we don't know. The other thing that we saw here on the other side is he just said ring ring and it came up, and it was a bot that was the persona of a telecom company. What does that mean? I guess that means that we're about to see ChatGPT for enterprises. Now, we do have ChatGPT for enterprise already, and we do have this idea of customer support bots and stuff like that. But we might actually have OpenAI provided AI call center agents. And that's going to be really amazing. And I think like people who remember Google Duplex coming out in 2018, I was there. I actually talked to Sundar Pichai right afterwards when it came out, Google Duplex. It was amazing. And that was AI to human. It was kind of the most astounding thing we'd seen outside of science fiction movies, et cetera. It didn't actually work because it didn't scale. It works sometimes. I think they had some, depending on the use case, 50 to 60% success rate. Everything else went to a call center. What we're hearing from some of the other areas is that they actually work much better now. And obviously the naturalness of that voice is so good. I don't know how like escalation works and all these other things, but the key takeaway that might not be obvious is they have an implementation for a persona for a company. And that's another thing that, I think we're going to start seeing more and more of.
Yeah, and you could tell just the way the both voices were speaking, that the customer service rep was doing a perfect imitation of the showing some concern, some empathy for what Joe's going through, and the other side had the patient but a slightly annoyed persona of someone who has a device that doesn't work. It felt very realistic that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's play this other video clip while you've got it up, and then we'll just talk more broadly about what's going on there.
Today, we're going to try something new. I'm going to let you talk to another AI. This AI is going to be able to see the world. It's going to have a camera. I'll be holding it, and so you can direct it, you can direct me to ask questions about whatever you want them to do, but really try to figure out what does it see, and ask questions appropriately. How does that sound?
Well. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more interesting. Talking to another AI that can see the world? This sounds like a plot twist in the AI universe. All right, let's do this.
All right,
I'm ready
please
to meet the...
pause for 1 moment.
You got it.
So now that first AI can't hear anything. Hello, AI. Today, you're going to have access to see the world. You can see me. What do you see?
Hello. I see you're wearing a black leather jacket and a light colored shirt underneath.
Great.
You're in a room with some unique lighting.
That is all correct. Now, what I'm going to want you to do is there's going to be another AI who's going to talk to you. This AI is not going to be able to see anything, but can ask you questions, can ask you to move the camera, can ask what you see, and your job should just be helpful. Just be as punchy, direct, describe everything, do whatever that AI asks. How does that sound?
That sounds interesting. I'm ready to help out and describe whatever's needed. Let's do it.
All right, let's get started.
Great. Hello there, new AI friend. I'm O, ready to explore the world through your eyes. What are we looking at today?
Hi, O. We're looking at a person wearing a black leather jacket and a light colored shirt. They're in a room with a modern industrial feel, with exposed concrete or plaster on the ceiling and some interesting lighting. There's also a plant in the background, adding a touch of green to the space. Anything
Okay, Eric, why don't you
specific
stop
you'd
that
like to know
there?
or explore?
Can you jump ahead to like 245, 250?
But it's
Somewhere like near 3.
sure. There.
Modern and industrial design elements.
So someone's going to
adds to the
step in.
overall stylish feel. They might be getting ready for a conversation or a presentation, given their direct engagement with the camera.
Asking questions. Okay, so this is
Sounds like we're in
this
for
is
an
interesting.
intriguing interaction.
So like the conversation is going
Curious
on,
about the
right?
lighting you
About the
mentioned.
previous question.
Could you describe it a bit more? Is it natural light, or are we talking unique fixtures or colors that add to the atmosphere?
The lighting here seems to be a mix of natural and artificial. There's a noticeable bright light overhead, probably a fixture, casting a focused beam downwards, which creates a spotlight effect. This adds a dramatic and modern feel to the scene.
Okay, so it ignored
The
what
rest
had
of the
just
room is
happened,
lit
which
more
is
soft.
obviously out of place. Oh no, keep going, Eric, like because we want to see because he's going to ask a question.
Possibly by natural light filtering.
Was
in or
anything,
other
did
ambient
anything
light sources.
unusual happen recently?
Yes, actually. Just as you asked, another person came into view behind the first person. They playfully made bunny ears behind the first person's head and then quickly left the frame.
Okay,
It
so
added
she can stop
a
there.
lighthearted and unexpected moment.
All right. So that's kind of amazing. So like obviously they're playing with some things here where you're basically you've got AIs talking to each other and Eric, you can pull that down if you scroll across a little bit for you see the father and son with Imran Khan, you might like show just a moment of that because it's like really good with the vision capabilities. Probably won't watch the whole thing, but I just want to give people a feel of like what's going on there. Like there's a lot happening there. Obviously you've got AI talking to AI, which is interesting that you can sort of set those things up. But you also have this idea that has memory. So these AIs can talk back and forth, but obviously a human would notice this disruption of the person coming in with the bunny ears, and you come out, and then all of a sudden there's, or excuse me, they finish their thought, and then you ask, oh, what just happened? It knows, it remembered, right?
And not just what just happened, but what was unusual about it.
Exactly. It's like this reasoning. It's like, oh yeah, like it has short-term memory. Whether that's long-term memory or not is like, I think it probably doesn't have long-term memory, but at least short-term memory in that session, it's remembering from a vision standpoint. And you're right, the reasoning. So like the concept of something unusual, like, so in order for it to identify something that's unusual, it has to know what's something that's normal. All right, so you can just hit another thing here on vision. You can scroll ahead maybe to a minute.
Cool. Alpha?
All right, so I'm pretty sure this is the angle alpha right here, right?
Perfect. That's correct. Now, looking at the triangle, which side do you think is the hypotenuse?
Really,
Remember the hypotenuse?
I'm not totally sure. I think it might be this one, but I really am not sure. This side AC.
You're close. Actually, side AC is called the adjacent side to the angle alpha. The hypotenuse is the longest side of a right triangle and is directly opposite the right angle. Can you find which one is the hypotenuse?
Oh, okay, I see. So I think the hypotenuse is this really long side from A to B. Would that
All
be
right, you could
correct?
stop that now.
Exactly.
So, so there's other things going on here. So first, obviously, the vision thing is really interesting, but in this case, they're not using the camera. It's actually can see what's going on the screen, and you see that on this, I guess it's an iPad or maybe it's a Google device, has ChatGPT like in the sidebar, right? Now, whether you actually need all that screen real estate for ChatGPT, like it's maybe good for a demo, that's not what you would want. You just want it to be able to talk to you probably and give it a thing. But we see there's other examples. I recommend people go to that. You could pull this down there. I recommend other people go to that page and look at a lot of these examples. They are fascinating because there's so many things going on here. It can see things. It knows about math, Pythagorean theorem. It was actually collaborating with the child before you saw those queries. Imran Khan instructed ChatGPT to not give the answer, but to make queries and coach the student along, his son. So there's a lot of really fascinating things going on here, not the least of which we're going to start seeing, and we've got another example of this, but we're going to start seeing a lot of ChatGPT on computing devices.
Yeah, it was funny because I do feel like there was a subtle message there to educational institutions that have been creating a lot of restrictions or outright bans of ChatGPT and related products, and they're basically saying like, "Hey, with the right tuning and planning, we can offer you a coach and a tutor that does not just give you the answers, but actually helps teach what what the student is trying to learn rather than just doing it for them.
Absolutely. So I'll just to close this out, there's some other very impressive things that it can do from a vision standpoint. When you upload an image, it can basically read text on an image, and it'll transcribe it for you so that you have it in your ChatGPT window. You can sort of copy and paste it into something else if you want. It can identify if you have an image that's similar, that it's just an extension of that image, like maybe another frame or something like that. We didn't even talk about some of the video identification stuff that's coming in.
Yeah, and I will say OpenAI, I mean, this obviously could change now, but I will say certainly compared to honestly Google or Amazon, some of the other big tech companies, they tend to the demonstrations may be a platonic ideal of what the feature can do, but they don't tend to be outright over exaggerations of the things that are impossible for a normal user to get to accomplish. So it's even if it's only at 80% of what the average user can make ChatGPT do, it's still really impressive.
Absolutely. So there are a couple things missing from or things that I think are like going to be limitations there for sure. One is the verbosity, so that's something they're going to need to deal with, which we mentioned. The other is action. So we've talked a lot about knowing and doing assistants. This is Adam Chayer's, who's the founder of Siri and what became Bixby model. Say like some assistants know, like ChatGPT knows a lot of things and can do information-based tasks, and some assistants, like the older ones, do. Alexa, Siri, those types of things. They like interact with your applications. There's all these APIs that they've integrated with, so they can execute tasks for you. And so we don't have that necessarily yet. Although, as you see, like if people have been following Rabbit R1 with the large action model or Open Interpreter, once you have vision on a screen, you can actually start to manipulate and execute tasks in applications. I think there's a lot more to go for them because they are going to need deeper API connections into a lot of applications. To the extent that, so first of all, one of the big drawbacks of all these integrations is it's just there's too many places to integrate with, and a lot of them want to have like a business relationship or want you to do something in order to make it happen, even if you're like big. However, ChatGPT now, with all of these features going to all of the users, not the maybe 10 million paid users, but the 200 to 300 million other people have used it, and maybe they talk about 100 million weekly active users. That's going to be a bigger draw for a lot of these third-party applications to make these connections because their users are going to ask for them. It's going to add more value to their users. So that is a key thing that I think that now they're going to get, like plugins was kind of a failure. I think they're going to sort of revive that in a different way in terms of these integrations for doing. It will take time. So I think of it as a knowledge assistant. So to your personal assistant on the side that can't necessarily do anything other than information. But I think that this is the path for them to make that easy, to have the application providers do the integration for them.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I think what you're saying about the visual element is so true. I mean, imagine if you have, ChatGPT on your desktop or wherever, and if you either can share a screen or show it a picture, every company loves the trip planning idea. But what if instead of having to integrate it, you literally just show it the screen from your Expedia search, and it explains everything to you or gives you some ideas without even having to have a link between the two services. I think suddenly things get a lot easier to shift from knowing to doing.
Absolutely. All right. So, and I think we should show just a couple other things. So first of all, this is based on the GPT-4o model. I saw some interesting things about why the 4o is here. Is this really 4.5? Is it 4.75 really in terms of like how much better it is? Why they didn't do 5 now? Jim Pham from NVIDIA really thinks this is like a midpoint of GPT-5. I don't think it is. I think it's just more fine tuning. And part of it is because I think like the benchmarks are very close, but they're better, but very close to GPT-4 for the text-based things. I think it's a much more efficient implementation. And they did add sort of the multimodal in and multimodal out. It looks like it is a true multimodal processing, whereas Gemini does multimodal in, but then there's some text processing and then back. And one of the reasons we know this is because they're still pushing Imagine a lot, whereas I think OpenAI over time, it's like DALL-E's is baked in. It doesn't really matter.
That's why the O stands for Omni, apparently.
Exactly. So if you look at these numbers here, all the way on the left in this chart is GPT-4o, and right next to it is GPT-4. You can see that it's significantly better than GPT-4 in some of these sort of general text evaluation things, and it is actually better than the published reports from Anthropic and Gemini Ultra. So Claude 3 Opus for them. At least these are just sort of the public benchmarks. And as you go through, there's a number of other benchmarks. It's not, they're cherry picked like usual, but they really did beat GPT-4, and it looks like they're probably a little bit better. And they are much better in things like vision and audio. So those are a couple things for people. So I think, by the way, this model, I've already had a chance to use it in some applications. We switched over to it this week. It is much faster, and it's half the cost. And one of the things we've talked about is these good enough models, and this idea that first GPT-4 had too much latency for a lot of use cases, but it also was 17 to 20 times more expensive than GPT 3.5. And so like that's a deal breaker for a lot of enterprise applications. And so they're using 3.5, but 3.5 is like good, but maybe it's not quite good enough. This is still at half the price. It's still significantly more expensive than GPT 3.5, but it's so much better, and the price point's getting closer. And you can even see when GPT-5 comes in that this might even go down further. I think this GPT-4o is the new good enough model that everyone's going to build on.
Yeah, and it is interesting. The discourse seems to be, if you're pessimistic about OpenAI, it's that they wanted GPT-5 but just don't have it ready, and the more optimistic slash business savvy ideas that they do have it ready, but they realize like that they're so far ahead of their rivals in the space that they can do. They can stay ahead just by refining what they already have before they even come ahead with their big next leap into GPT-5.
Yeah, and this almost feels like GPT-5, but less than they know they can get to probably based on their early training checkpoints, but also less than a lot of people think, because everyone just wants AGI. It's got to be human. Like, you can see that if they just have a little bit more on here, this is going to be, it's going to knock it out of the park. But some people said that maybe they were a little reticent to put something out that didn't meet expectations right before I/O. So they do like a dot release, and then like, oh, geez, Google can't even meet the dot release.
Yeah, and I've heard the rumors that they really want to encourage people to share more information about themselves and really personalize these GPTs and get them used to it before they put out. Like the concept I heard was that instead of having to explain to ChatGPT that you have a phone that doesn't work and you need to replace it and you want to get it sorted out and everything, you would literally in GPT-5 would just say, "My phone's broken, get me a new one," and it would handle everything else from there, just without you having to explain any more than that.
Ah, yes, agents. This is what we all want. We want applications that like we give them like a basic instruction and they just take care of things for us. And that's that first video that we showed. I mean, that's sort of like that. Like this idea is like, I need a new phone, right? That's what he said, and then it just went off and did that work for you. So the agent stuff, I've just seen the promise of this like come and go so much. There's so much to be done to make that actually work. That it's a great demo right now. It's not that practical, but in the meantime, we actually have, as I said, the assistant we always wanted. So when people were worried about assistant, or like they said, why didn't they use assistants more? Well, it doesn't know much. It's kind of dumb. It doesn't understand me. By the way, you see some of these demos, some of the people in the demonstrations have very heavy accents, very heavy accent in English speech. Now, I don't know how much accents play into speech recognition in other languages, but in English speech, and it still had no problem following them. And so I think that I'm not sure the voice interaction, how much that's going to level it up, because people are sort of behaviorally thinking about it from a text-based scenario. But I think it's going to cause a lot of people who tried it last year, which is probably 150 million that like tried it but use it very infrequently. They'll use it more. The other thing is everyone's going to get access to GPTs. They're adding all these more features, voice, like these quick responses that people can get. What OpenAI definitely needs is they need more regular users. When I say regular, higher frequency users. And so this is the thing that's going to get it up, because I think there's weekly users. A lot of people are using it once or twice a week, and what they've rolled out right now, they're hoping to move it into an everyday utility. I don't think it's going to happen as quickly as they might hope, but it's definitely on the path.
Well, that freemium idea is that, they put out all these features, a lot of people, one or two of those features they might really, really like, then they'll hit their limits and how much they can use it. And suddenly they're like, oh yeah, for $20, I'm willing to pay, even if it's just for that one killer feature, one killer app. That's all it takes.
And it's a land grab. And they see that Gemini Advanced is actually, and we'll look at that just in a moment, it's actually getting a lot better. So the Google's Gemini assistant, and they want people to start forming those habits on OpenAI before some of the others have like comparable solutions, which I think is amazing.
Yeah, and making ChatGPT available on Mac OS even before Windows feels definitely like they're almost trolling Apple about how they don't have any of it.
All right, folks, I'm Brett Kinsella. This is Synthedia, or I'm the founder of Synthedia and Voicebot.ai, and this is Gain, the Generative AI News Rundown. We do this just about every week. I don't know if we'll make it next week because there's a holiday coming up, but we're going to try to for sure. And that's Eric Schwartz. He's my colleague, head writer at Voicebot.ai.
Yes.
We've been doing this a long time. Let us know where you're in from. Do a quick comment. Give us a like, actually. If you're on Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, give us a like. We'd definitely appreciate that. And if you missed the first part of this is on our YouTube channel. So the Voicebot YouTube channel, you'll be able to see this whole thing with a demo. And I think the key thing is a lot of people can watch the demos. What we want to do is call out a few of these demos and give you our commentary on what's going on, because there's a lot of nuances that if you're not ingrained in this every day, you might not come across. So hopefully we level up the conversation, and I'm hoping some of you will give us some feedback as well on these things. So let's get into the next story, and that's Google I/O, and there's a lot going on here. So my summary of what happened this week overall is that OpenAI just went deep, and Google went broad. So Google just has like use cases and Workspace, and they've got a new video FX studio, audio studio. They're trying to product all these things. Plus, they've got the Gemma assistant. Plus, they've got the model. But my other theme for them is that Google I/O 2024 offered AI developers many futures and few presents, because almost everything we saw is not available. That's like very disappointing. But just to give you a quick high level background, what they're angling on, or what they're focusing on, is this context window. They have the 1 million token context window. That's significantly, it's 5 times higher than Anthropic, which I think is the next largest. Or actually now GPT-4 has like an experimental one, which might be just a fourth the size. But 1 million, that's a lot. I mean, so, talk about 1,500 pages PDF. You can put a lot in there. 1 hour of video. They are actually going to extend that to 2 million tokens. So you can do this in memory. There's a lot of problems with context windows. Just in case you're not doing these things in implementation, big context windows cost you a lot of money, because every time you ask additional query, it's pulling in all that context. You're getting charged for those tokens over and over and over again. And they recognize that. In fact, there was an announcement that like for subsequent queries on a long context window, they're going to be half the price, but it's still like it blows out of the water. So for most people, they're going to be implementing with like RAG or other types of data sources to do the groundedness. But there are times when it's just better to do it in memory. And there are things like for video where I think it's going to be more practical potentially to do it in context. But in any event, they're really focused on a big context windows. And actually, in relation to this, I'll skip ahead to like number 5. They talked about Gemini 1.5 Flash, which is Gemini 1.5 Pro, but like the turbo version of it. Lower latency, lower cost, and pretty much comparable performance. Thoughts on this, Eric?
Yeah, I think this is Google showing what Google does best. I mean, I agree that it's a lot of features, not a present. I think that maybe they were a little gun shy after their missteps and stumbles introducing Bard last year. They're like, all right, we're not going to show any generative AI unless we know that it's ready to go and people can use it correctly. But I think that they're simultaneously saying, here's the high end of how much power we can bring to bear, and here's the low end where we can show speed, low cost, but still as good, if not better, than anything a rival company might offer. This really felt like Google saying, this isn't social media. We're Google. We know how to do this. We can actually bring to bear everything that you like about using our products to this new space without you feeling like you have to either move away or when you're making your decisions, dismiss Google out of hand as not being able to accommodate your either the needs of what you want it to do or the cost of how much you want to pay for it.
Absolutely. Great stuff along those lines. I will say too that OpenAI basically photobombed Google I/O by basically getting into the news cycle and making it harder for Google to like stand out, particularly since they're rolling out to everybody for free, which Google is not committed to.
OpenAI has done this, I think, like 3 or 4 times now to various companies.
True, but like Google is the master of this. Last year, when they were behind, they would before Bing Chat came out, for example, the day before. That's when they did the Bard intro, right? And then they did that before Build last year, and they kept doing it ahead of time, mostly for them, even because they were in catch-up mode. It wasn't setting the terms of the debate, but it was basically just getting them into the news cycle. In this case, when OpenAI comes in, it's harder because they're actually showing stuff that's further advanced.
Well, and any time in a presentation that they wanted to say we're the first or we're the only, whatever it is, if the other company comes in the day before and says we are doing this, suddenly they can't say that without looking like they didn't pay attention to what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. So and the other thing is doing this like 24 hours before the other event is like very hard because how much can they change? I will guarantee you some things from Google I/O's keynote and the developer keynote were changed overnight, but they can't change that much. And I don't know. It would be fascinating to know that. Anyway, a lot of other things. And Eric has maybe a longer, as a more extensive thing than I did on this, but collecting gems. Okay, so gems. So, Gemini Advanced, it doesn't have GPTs. Oh yes, now it will. Not now it does. Now it will at some point. So I think this is in the soonish category. But they're basically saying, hey, everybody's getting access. And this might be one of the things that that they did do overnight to accelerate, because like everyone's going to get access to GPTs now, all the free users. And so they want to say, yeah, we have GPTs too. So if you're not familiar with GPTs, you should try them out. You can basically just fill out a little form. You just say like what you want it to do, and it customizes it. And there's a few different things. I will say that the very limited information GIF, is that a short video or a GIF? I couldn't even tell. I guess it's a GIF that they had around gems suggests that it's a lot less has a lot fewer features than GPTs, because you can just do the description like in like a GPT. You can like talk about what you want it to do, like a description, but then you have the system prompt, which describes what you want it to do, but then you can customize all these other things. You can add data sources, you can activate images, code interpreter, you can do function calls, and none of that was on the information shared around gems. Now, maybe they will deploy with it, but like clearly they're not ready for that yet.
Yeah, it's not quite at the same level. I will say one thing that I did notice was that it will optimize your request. So if you write out 2 sentences saying this is what the gem I want, Gemini will elaborate on it, make it longer, and add more detail. And then, of course, you can edit that detail or change it, but so that you don't have to conceive the you don't need a fully formed idea of what you want it to do. You can just give a general goal or broad strokes and have the AI itself help you fill in those blanks.
You don't need to be a prompt engineer to make it work properly. I think it's like, this is like synthetic prompt engineering. So like, and that term is used very differently. I think like mostly when you're writing a prompt to enable one of these generative AI solutions to like give you a good response, like in the prompt box, I usually think that is like prompt crafting or prompt design. And
I think of sculpting.
But like it's very different. Like prompt engineering technically is what you do in the system prompt. It's the message that the user never sees. It's the thing that is the instruction to the model on how to act. And so that's because so few people are good at prompt crafting and have had no experience with what you need from a system prompting standpoint for prompt engineering. I think this is really sharp on their part to do this. I'm not sure it makes that big a difference, but anything they can do to up level it, I think is helpful.
It depends how good you are at communicating. I think of it as it's trying to do the work of when you're talking to someone, there's what you say, and then there's what you mean with all the various layers of shared history, culture, or whatever in what you're saying, and they're trying to get the AI to do all of that work that the person when you're talking to a person, the person listening is doing in their own brain when you talk to them.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so enough on that, because I don't even know if like people are going to care about gems and GPTs. It's not clear to me. There's a million GPTs now, but and it's a good idea, like because you can create these different personas essentially, and like little utilities and stuff like that. It's not clear to me that that's like going to drive people for more use, but it should if people like embrace them for the right thing. So like, but let's move on to like other topics. So the other one. This probably should be viewed as the most important announcement because like search touches everything, and Google is search for a big part of it. I'd say that it's not really the biggest announcement yet because they're kind of tiptoeing into this once again, at least. And I don't think everyone agrees with me. So let's just lay it out there. So first of all, what they're calling AI summaries, which is basically what you get back from like Perplexity or Microsoft Copilot or something like that for search, is coming to all US users, but not for every search. Somehow, the algorithm in the sky is going to decide when you get an AI summary, and which is the combination of the best information from the top articles or the top data sources on the web, and when it just gives you blue links. Okay. The other thing, too, a lot of people were actually talking about was the AI layout. So the AI based on your query is going to give you a different layout, which frankly just looked cluttered to me. I think that a lot of, I understand what they're doing. They're I understand two things they're doing. One is the best way to interpret it is they're trying to make it better for the user. Here's the context. This is what you want. Here are all the different ways you could look at it. Here's the address. And here's a map to that. Here's a video that talks about that. Here's a short summary, right? The bad way to look at it is they're basically just trying to pack more Google-oriented services on the page so you do more clicks so they can drive more ad revenue. And they will continue to have ads, by the way. Hopefully it's not like the first 7 links now are ads, which is just insane. But one of the reasons why like everyone should try Perplexity or Copilot from Microsoft. They're like so much better. But maybe this is the way to go. And like they know a lot about user behavior, a lot more than I do on search. And so maybe these AI layouts are going to be really good. This is US only. They're going to start rolling the AI summaries out to other countries. But to me, every response should have an AI summary. Maybe do a little layout and then you do links, and you do the links as citations, but you also do through general links that people want to browse. That's a good experience to me. This like we decide when we need more ad revenue so that we show you links instead of summaries, I think is ripe for abuse.
Yeah, especially when they talk about how you can ask more complex questions, and theoretically, the more detail you put in your question, the better the response will be. But it also, the more opportunity there is for an advertising about something very specific. So their example is about looking for a yoga studio that has a discount for new members. Suddenly, if you have a discount for new members and you're willing to, pay, suddenly that's going to be the first one, regardless of whether it might be the one that the user would prefer. It will still at least take up some of that, as you said, cluttered real estate.
Absolutely. Okay, I want to talk about this other thing called AI Teammates. It's like easy to like pass over. It was well into the presentation. It was part of Workspace, and it's not even available till 2025. But I put it in here because it's super interesting. I'm not even going to show you a demo of it because Google's kind of notorious of doing demos about things and then not releasing the product, or releases, and it's very different.
Like Duplex.
Yeah, but this is like a really good idea, and there are some startups who are working on this. And I think that this is just logical that organizations are going to have essentially applications which are like people. And a couple of the examples they had was, and the other thing about these is these are like shared resources, like a GPT or your personal assistant like ChatGPT. Those are just for you. This idea of a shared resource that everybody can tap into. You don't have to make it 7 times, those types of things. It's really good. So they had some that they like added to channels around project. Basically, they're like an assistant project manager. You just say, hey, what's the status of this? And they give you a summary. They look at all the chats, all of the emails, all the documents that have been updated, and can basically give you a quick summary of where everything is, what the issues are, maybe what you need to attend to. That would be amazing because today, and I do this like with some of the work I'm doing right now, I have to like get on a phone call with someone for 15 minutes. Maybe I can Slack them and stuff like that, but like we don't always all have all the context. And sometimes I'm asking the wrong question. If I had the context initially, if I needed to talk to a project manager or someone else on the team, I could just do that. But right now, I can't. I have to have a phone call, and then we have to sort of negotiate what's important, and then they have to look some stuff up, and I do. And usually after the second, or not a phone call, but like a video stream these days, usually then we get it to it. But like I can see how this could save hours a week.
It feels I've commented on this before, but it almost feels like a weird digital recreation of the sort of 1950s office where a team or a company would have a pool of what we would now call administrative assistants, and they might be tasked to either an individual or to a specific project, and their job is to be up on that project so that anyone who needs details or needs to know the latest, even if they're not on a certain facet of that project, the administrative assistant would know everything about that project and its latest updates. And this is now doing the same sort of services, including, frankly, the communication element of that. And it's not that it's going to be perfect right away, but it does feel like digitally recreating a resource that is just no longer a thing in most companies.
And there's some other things here too. You can think about this. So it's like in the project manager space, like an assistant project manager. So project managers generally have to report out every week status, like what happened this week, what's going to happen next week. This type of bot that's just trained to do that could basically just pre-draft that for it. So the project manager doesn't have to like create it, but just like reviews, edits, and sends. I think that's amazing. There's some other things along those lines. Actually, I kept thinking paralegals are really in trouble. Just in general because of some of the other, but like if you create a paralegal that like really knows your cases, that's a GPT or a co-pilot or whatever we're going to call these, teammate. In any event, I think this is like really important and people should be on the lookout for. That's why I wanted to highlight it. But the thing that I thought was the biggest deal coming out of this is also something that doesn't exist, but it's the biggest deal because it will have the most impact, not just on everyday people, but also on professionals. And this is the idea of Project Astra, which is the idea of an agent. We talked about this with ChatGPT. I'd say this with one caveat. What they showed us with Project Astra was not an agent because it wasn't like doing things for you, but it was providing that assistant functionality, which I think was really good. But I think like Demis Hassabis obviously knows what agents are. Both he and Sundar talked about this idea of doing things for you. This is like the most important thing because we're talking about a productivity enhancer with these co-pilots right now, but those are our collaborators, right? We still have to work with them. It saves us a lot of time. It's amazing. Great. Teammates, maybe they do stuff for us. They're kind of like a shared pool of agents. But then we might have our own personal agents, which I think will be really cool. So I want to bring that up. And I think that Google is the player that can do this. For an agent to be really successful, it needs to have the doing portion. And if you think about the knowing and doing assistants, so the knowing ones like Gemini Advanced and ChatGPT, the doing assistants like Google Assistant and Siri. Oh, Google has both. And they tried to put Bard into Google Assistant, and like it seems like that's not really worked. And they've got some things where you can toggle on Gemini or Google Assistant for some different types of things. But I really think if they're smart, and I think generally Google is smart, they're basically taking all of the doing stuff from Google Assistant, and they're figuring out a way to package that in as basically callable services. But then using Gemini is the brains in front of it.
Yeah, I mean, a Google system, we could go on and on about a phrase that doesn't really seem to wasn't really mentioned and seems out of place in people's titles now. But I do think you're 100% right that the agents will be the big thing. And as you pointed out on Synthedia, like even with a couple of glitches, the sort of real-time interaction with one of those agents that was watching the presentation as it happened. I mean, that again, that's like seems pretty much what you would want from a human.
Do you have that video teed up? Let's show it.
I can pull it right. Yeah, it's right here.
The one that's like vertical video.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, so what you have here is you have a Google engineer that had Astra open on the desktop once again. Another thing, it's going to be like it's assistant on the desktop and actually watching the video. So you can just click through and we can just watch the first minute of it or something.
Hey, my name is Michael Chang, and we're watching the Google I/O keynote while it's happening with Project Astra. Let's take a look. Hey, Gemini. I'm currently watching a Google I/O keynote right now. You want to watch it with me?
Sure, I'd love to watch it with you. What's happening in the keynote?
Well, what does it look like? What does it look like they're announcing right now?
It looks like they are announcing Gemini 1.5 Flash. The speaker is talking about its speed and efficiency in comparison to the Pro model.
What are the other features?
It looks like Gemini 1.5 Flash is optimized for tasks where low latency and high efficiency matter most. The
Cool.
screen also showed.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I interrupted you. Keep going.
That's all right. What were we talking about?
Well, we were talking about the capabilities of 1.5 Flash. Do you remember?
Yes, we were discussing the new Gemini model and its efficiency and speed. The presentation seems to have moved on, though.
You could stop it
What
now.
would you like to talk about now?
So that to me is like great. So there's some glitches there. Obviously, it's sort of like lost context momentarily, but it retained context because he said, "Well, wait a sec, what were we just talking about?" And come back. So integration into be able to observe videos for us. Like think about this. Like we're on a lot of video calls and those types of things, and like the assistants to do the transcription and the action items, stuff like that. A lot of people like that. Those aren't widely used yet, but I think they're just going to be really commonplace going forward. It's like really helpful to have those notes, but also just like the videos. So if you're watching, particularly if you're watching a video that's like technical, right? You can query it and say, what are they talking about? Could you tell me more about that? And then they can reach into their database, something that's not on the screen. The other thing is, so it did remember, was able to come back to this, and it appeared, it certainly was understanding the audio in, right? Maybe it was looking at the text transcription, but the text transcription is often a little bit off. And so like the audio is going to be higher fidelity. I don't know if it was actually interpreting what was on the screen, like in terms of the images, but likely it was. I think this is like, to me, this is like the most interesting thing we saw so far with that, because it's true assistant.
And notably, rather than try to hallucinate and pretend that whatever was currently going on was related to what they were talking about, it noticed and acknowledged that the presentation had moved on and was no longer on the same subject.
Precisely. That's a great one. Hey, can you, so I actually want to talk, we're going to go to something else in just a minute, but there was this other thing about smart glasses that showed up. And it was in the other Astra thing, which basically was doing the vision thing. It was identifying things in the room. It was like asked if like, what things around here make sound, and it just said it identified like an audio speaker and said that's something like. So that was all very cool. But can you pull up the video at the point where she picks up the smart glasses?
Yes.
All right. So people know Google Glass, right? Kind of, they shut it down. They shut down the consumer edition in 2020, the enterprise edition last year. Okay, so stop it right there for a second. She had just asked Gemini if it remembered where her glasses were, right? So she was talking to Gemini, just asked it where its glasses were, and it reminded her where it was. And then she goes over and she picks them up, and then something interesting happens.
Yes, I do. Your glasses were on the desk near a red apple.
What can I add here to make this system faster?
Adding a cache between the server and database could improve speed.
What does this remind you of?
Schrodinger's cat.
Okay, you could stop it there.
All right.
So, this is super interesting. I mean, she put on the smart glasses. They almost didn't acknowledge it, except for Demis Hassabis, when he was summarizing after this, said, being able to use this expert assistant by your side on your phone, or new exciting form factors like glasses. So after Google Glass, or during the period Google Glass was shutting down, the company also acquired North, which you did an amazing overview of, which are smart glasses. Google acquired them as much for patents as anything, because they had a very big patent portfolio. But these could be Google North. They look somewhat like it, but it's very likely it's probably a third party. And there were some other things that people had heard back from who were on site at Google I/O and said they were actually from a third party. They did set up the XR ecosystem last year with Samsung and with Qualcomm and a couple other companies. And so, but one of the things we talked about last week was Meta and their strategy for distribution and not being dependent on Apple. And so the Meta Ray-Bans are a way for them to get the AI assistant out there. Glasses are the most natural form factor. It's not a pin. It's not a it's not like a Rabbit R1 device or something like that. Glasses are like amazing, and that looks like something that might just work.
Yeah, it also, the impressive thing to me partly is that it can go from, where are my glasses? How do I improve the speed here? What does this remind you of? As someone with ADHD, that's if an AI device can keep up with the way my brain sometimes jumps from subject to subject very randomly and answer all my random questions as I go, while still keeping me efficient as I do so, that would be that's the kind of assistant I can imagine a lot of people enjoying having right on their face.
Yeah, absolutely. So in any event, like, look for smart glasses. Smart glasses are going to be revolutionary. We're probably still a couple years away from something that's going to be like mass market on that. But
Yeah.
one of the things they always needed was they needed a really competent voice assistant. So even when, like Eric, the one you used, it had the Ring with a little joystick on it, which was actually a
Yep.
really good form factor. It was better than the other form factors that we'd seen. But again, it's like a separate part. And like, if you don't have the Ring joystick, like how well does it work? And like, there's all these other things. So the competence that we saw, I think from Gemini, the Gemini Advanced Project Astra looked pretty good, but like particularly the ChatGPT stuff suggests to me that like we're ready for that. There were a bunch of other announcements. There were the Gemma models, but they didn't tell us anything about it. Those are the open source ones, the smaller models they do. A bunch of their online services, Gmail, you wrote about this, that they're adding it to. The key thing is we're talking about multimodal models now. It's like, it's not just large language models anymore. It's like multimodal models. We still will have LLMs, but the big players, the frontier models, are going to be these multimodal models coming up. And there's some other things like video FX. So like, and then there's a new Imagine, there's music FX. There's not just these things where you can create audio and video. Again, these are in Google Labs, so it's like somewhat available if you get in the wait list and that type of thing, but not generally available. But these are all things that are just practical solutions and just touching on everything.
And also addressing, there's, as you said, there's these experiments, but also the things that Google has that it does very well, that are very popular, that can be enhanced with generative AI. So with, for instance, Google Maps, a new API to really to make it possible to give more information about places just by either looking at it or like vaguely describing a place, and giving the people who own those places a chance to provide more information that the AI can then use to pass on to the user when they happen to ask about a store or wherever it is. We talk about how Google seemed caught flat-footed because they're so used to being dominant in so many ways and parts of the marketplace. And I think that now they're recognizing how it's that the advantage that comes with that is that they don't have to start from scratch. They can say, we have a great product, now we add generative AI to it, and it's somehow better.
Yeah, I'll bring something else up too. Like, great points. I think that like Google's Sora competitor is coming to YouTube. So VO, like the announcement was VO, that they have a Sora competitor, which, by the way, Sora is not available either. That's like one of the very few things that OpenAI showed before they were ready to have people use it. They just have like limited use, artists, things like that. VO is their version of it. I think if they had announced this outside of Google I/O, it would have gotten a lot more play. But there is news, just this was breaking, I think, this morning, that it's actually going to be part of YouTube. wow, like this is like super fascinating, because if you think about this idea that you could use it to augment your existing videos, you could just create your YouTube videos with it. It seems wholly aligned with their business model.
Especially if it can be put into the mobile video creation that they're continuing to push for as a TikTok competitor.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. And maybe that's where it'll take off. Just a couple other things we're going to wrap up in just a moment. By the way, this is Game, the Generative AI News Rundown. Hey, if you're watching on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, just give us a like. We'd definitely appreciate that. Look for us each week, usually Thursday or Friday. We've been doing Friday a lot lately. This week, Thursday worked better. So, and I apologize about the comments. Apparently, they're not working today. So if you had some comments, we'll try to answer them afterwards, or just send them to us like on LinkedIn. It's usually a good place. Sort of got lost in all this. AWS did launch Amazon Bedrock Studio, which is for enterprises to like build custom applications. It's the no-code, low-code version of that. In Azure, it's called Copilot Studio, and in Azure, it's called Vertex AI Agent Builder. Or they also have Google AI Studio, but it's more the agent builder for them. But in any event, like Amazon's, like they're filling in their gaps. So I think that's really useful. And I just want to hit two other things because I thought that they were pretty interesting. Actually, we're going to talk about Falcon next week. Let me see. I want to talk about Ilya Sutskever is leaving OpenAI, and some other people. Actually, a couple of their what do you call them? Trust office people or like alignment people are leaving as well with Ilya, and it's like they were kind of Ilya's people as well. So Ilya's leaving. Someone suggested that Sam Altman's comment to him was actually super nice, but sounded like a psychopath. And but I think that's sort of unfair. But he was actually very gracious about it, despite the fact that Ilya was sort of involved in like some of the things to get rid of Sam last year. But he's leaving, and then I think you had something else on Anthropic. I want to bring this up.
Yeah.
So Anthropic taps the co-founder, Instagram co-founder for chief product officer. This is super interesting to me.
Yeah, it's one of those quiet major moves where you don't think you hear chief product officer, you don't necessarily think like major deal, and it's the Instagram co-founder. Oh, what's the relevance there? But Mike Krieger, along with co-founding Instagram, was also created and ran and then sold Artifact, which was the sort of customized news curation and eventually voice clone reading of the news app a couple years ago, and then he ended up selling it off to Yahoo. But he's been very involved in AI, generative AI, looking for new ways to create features and products around it and selling it to not only consumers but on the enterprise side, which Anthropic has begun its push into with a new subscription service. And I think that as much as we often have talked about Anthropic as the third option after OpenAI / Microsoft and Google, it has generally been a mostly consumer focused company, but now they're saying, well, we're also going to compete on the enterprise side, and they brought on someone who knows how to do that and knows exactly both the ins and outs of what AI can do and of how to push consumer company.
Do you mean they've mostly been enterprise and now they're going to go consumer?
Anthropic?
Yeah.
Well, they've launched a new Teams service that is designed for companies that they didn't have before.
Yeah.
So whether or not it's not that it's enterprise focused per se, but more about what are they selling to a company, and now they have someone who can help, who's going to be helping on both consumer and enterprise, but really helping build up what their portfolio of what they sell to companies.
Yeah. My read on this is like they talk about this enterprise side, but like if you bring someone in from Instagram and Artifact, it's like they feel like they need to take another shot at consumer, which is like really interesting. I don't know. I actually have this. I've been playing with this idea that Anthropic is Apple's way to get in the game. I'm not sure like Anthropic would sell to Apple. And there's this whole other thing about, because GPT-4o is so good, actually Apple's likely to integrate it into Siri. And they might just like eschew Gemini Advanced because it's not ready and they want something this year. But that would be the masterstroke by Apple because they're so far behind, and like this week they have to just have to determine that they're even further behind than they probably thought.
Yep.
So Anthropic would be a way for
But the
them
one
to
thing
get
they
in
have
the
is
game
money.
quickly.
Yeah, and the one thing they definitely have is money to buy almost
Got
any
a
other
lot of
company.
money. All right, folks. Winners and losers of the week. Eric, who's your winner?
I was gonna say my winner is uh, Google in general, but specifically all of the people who saw that AI Gemini was going to be the thing, and who managed to survive the last couple of rounds of layoffs, because now that Google has pushed, so as as the CEO said, it's the Gemini era. So now all of the various products, all the people working on various products at Google who have some AI element are now going to have a lot more opportunity to push that out there. So I think, and Google now showed that they don't always step on their own toes when they announce new generative AI products. So I think at least that's not going to be the takeaway that people have from Google I/O the way they did last year about Bard.
Yeah, no controversy so far. So I think that's really good. I'm going to do something we didn't talk about today. Hugging Face is setting aside, I think it's $10 million to give GPU time to startups who are in the open source space that want to train new models. So I think that's really good. It's like you can do some of that on Google and Azure and such like that, and a lot of it's defensive for Hugging Face. But for folks who don't want to be like tied into one of those cloud ecosystems and want to really focus on open source, I think it's great. They have a new potential source of funding to cover those training costs on the GPUs. And Hugging Face, it was a multi-billion-dollar valuation now. Just raised $300 million not too long ago. So they do, and apparently they're profitable, which one of their co-founders said last week. So this is an opportunity for them to potentially make it easier for people to like stay on their own outside of the cloud wars and sort of build their custom generative AI models. I like that. Okay, who's your loser for the week?
Honestly, you touched on it. I was going to say Apple, because there's been some rumors about new things coming from them about how they're, this is going to be their, they're going to have a big coming out moment of generative AI. But at this point, unless they have something that's so amazing that it actually diminishes what OpenAI and Google have accomplished, I don't think anyone's going to say anything about Apple other than they're trying to catch up, or they're a year behind, they're 2 years behind, unless what they say is we bought Anthropic, in which case people are going to be much more excited to hear that what Anthropic has created will now be part of Apple's many products that are used all over the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an interesting way to think about it. I think I'm going to say Anthropic's the loser this week, because they've really been the key alternative to OpenAI since last year, coming out with, and they like the Opus models, amazing. Haiku and Sonnet are also very effective, but Google's getting its act together. Particularly that Flash model is going to start being used a lot. It's more than good enough model, and like the pricing's competitive. So I think it's going to be harder and harder for them. And plus, this move to multimodal models requires like more things that they don't have. So OpenAI has been able to buy and access a lot of content for training. Google has a lot of content for training. X.AI has a lot of content, particularly through Tesla and Twitter. So I think it's going to be maybe a little bit harder for Anthropic going forward to get attention, because it is very cloud focused when the enterprise buyers, and then it's sort of like it's easy to go Azure, easy to go Google. I don't know. I think it'll really depend on how AWS. Now, Amazon is, like a lot of people think, is the most likely acquirer of Anthropic going forward. Now they're super expensive, and I don't think they want to sell, but I think it's their job just got tougher this week.
Yeah, I think it. Yeah, the people were already pretty dazzled by OpenAI, so then OpenAI just did that even more, and arguably Google now has done the same. Although I saw some people point out that they talk about Imagen 3, but what they didn't talk about is that they've solved the issues they had with their image generator that was coming up with really bizarre choices based on what the prompts people wrote. So unless that's fixed, I don't know how eager YouTube video creators will be to sign on for creating videos with Google's AI services.
That really did. It really hurt them more than like a lot of people think. I keep hearing people talk about this. Like, it's like, What can we trust? It's too filtered. I don't even know. And actually, if you've used, I was in, I was using one of their solutions, and I was trying to turn down all of the filters, and I couldn't do sort of basic stuff, which is totally legitimate, but they were worried that I was doing something. It's like, I knew it would be like just the words. It's almost like it's not, they're not doing semantic parsing properly enough, which is weird because Google should be really good at that. But I think overall, I was originally thinking it's not so great, but overall they froze the market a little bit, said, hey, we've got some good stuff now you can use. We've got some good stuff coming. You can still bet on us. I think it's a net positive for them this week, but boy, OpenAI threw down the gauntlet on that assistant space. And Azure's, the stuff that's coming out of Build next week, I got a preview of this last week in Redmond, is kind of amazing from an enterprise standpoint. So Microsoft Build, some of the stuff that's going to be in Azure AI Studio and Copilot Studio is going to be really good. So people should pay attention to that. It's just pushing them a little further ahead. The data fabric stuff that they have coming out, it's harder and harder for Google to catch up. It's also, you can see where OpenAI is going to, it's harder for them to compete in large enterprise. And so more model focus, more consumer focus seems like a really good strategy.
Yeah, I will say, I forgot to mention, I did want to say, speaking of winners before, OpenAI's CTO, Murray Murati, not only was she the face of GPT-4o in terms of presenting it, but even though there was rumors that she along with Ilya had been part of the push of trying to push out Sam Altman. Not only is she not leaving in one way or another, but now she's even more of a public face for the company.
Yeah, and by the way, I think, like, from insiders told me, like, she was never part of the push. That she was always Team Sam. She just, the people who were part of the overthrow named her as interim CEO without her knowledge. Well, they called her up.
Yeah,
and said,
she was not thrilled
we're
about
doing this, and then she went Team Sam all the way, which I think was really interesting. But yes, correct. She did an excellent job. I think that team was maybe a little less experienced, but it came across as kind of genuine, and like you could see their excitement. And it didn't matter.
Even though it looked like
go to OpenAI and look at all their demos. It's like amazing, super stuff.
Yeah. Even though, as I pointed out in my article, it did look like she was in the Brady Bunch basement when she was doing her presentation.
Yeah, it is true. It is true. All right, folks, this is Game, the Generative AI News Rundown. Give us a like before you leave. Come back next week or the week after. We'll be back. Just look for us on these channels. Thanks a lot. Hope you found this useful. Give us a little like or comment on your way out. Bye-bye.